Harleen Quinzel was born to a normal family in the city of Gotham where she'd grow up having a relatively normal life, eventually discovering that she had a gift for gymnastics and would even go through Gotham University with a scholarship for it. However, that wouldn't be her passion, as she would go on to study psychology and would eventually earn her doctorate. Now a doctor, Harleen would go on to work at Arkham Asylum as an intern, where she'd beg for the opportunity to interview the Joker. After finding a note from the Joker in her office, she'd confront him and finally get to interview him. However, she'd quickly find herself empathizing with him for his story about an abusive and distant father, and soon after would outright fall in love with him, even going so far as to let him out, which she would immediately be caught for and placed in Arkham herself, waiting patiently for him to come back and rescue her. However, for months, she'd be left in Arkham until the Cataclysm event, when an earthquake would knock out the security system of Arkham, and she'd be let out of her cell and would wander across emergency workers aiding the victims of the Joker and would take off to his last known location, putting together her outfit before dragging the Joker down to a meeting with Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. Coming across it as the two sides were ready to blow each other away, she'd break the Penguin's nose, distracting his men while Jokers finished them. After robbing the Penguin, Harley would find a new base of operations for the gang at Gotham Docks, where she'd stay until the Batman would track them down and she'd distract him long enough for the gang to prepare a getaway. The next day, to thank her for all her hard work, the Joker would trap her in a rocket and shoot her into the sky, trying to kill her. Harley would then be able to maneuver the rocket, crashing into a park where she would be rescued by Poison Ivy and nursed back to health before telling Ivy her story. Ivy, having taken a liking to Harley and sympathizing with her, would give Harley a concoction to allow her to stay around her without any negative effects. This also had the side effect of giving Harley enhanced strength and speed as well as a healing factor. Now, wanting revenge, she tracked down Batman and would convince him to let her help bring in the Joker by bringing a tracker to his base. However, wishing to deal with the Joker personally, she'd leave the tracker by some henchmen and would attack Joker herself. However, Batman would get involved, but Harley would get the drop on him, knocking him out with a frankly stupidly sized mallet, and would nearly finish off the Joker before a mere apology would convince her to get back with him. And together they'd escape, starting a cycle of violence, abuse, and betrayal that would go on for years. Trivia Vanille was born to Jimmy and Caramel Vanille of the city of Vale roughly 20 years before the events of the series. She would grow up sheltered, her parents often not letting her out, and when she was allowed, it was usually under strict supervision in order to protect her, as her father had close ties to the crime lord He Zhang. This was so strict that at the age of 8, her only true friend was an imaginary representation of herself, which she named Neopolitan. Neo would ultimately prove to be a bad influence on the young girl, often convincing her to act out and breaking things around the house, sneaking out, and on one occasion as a teenager, Trivia would drug her tutor and even assault her father. Neo's influence on her would only grow as her semblance matured, allowing her to physically manifest Neo as early as 12. This growing delinquency would reach its limit as, when attempting to break out again, Trivia would accidentally set her room on fire, burning down that part of the house, and after trying to convince her parents that Neo was to blame, Jimmy would snap, destroying her imaginary friend in front of her. Preparatory Academy for Girls, where she would be bullied by the twins, Melidia and Melanine Malachite, and one night would follow the two out into the city in order to expose them to Brown, and it would be there that she would meet the aspiring criminal Roman Torchwick, saving him from the twins and their mother's gang with her semblance. Soon after this, she would be introduced to the true nature of the Academy as a front for the Malachite crime family, and would begin combat training, where she would be tasked with tracking Roman down for Lady Browning. However, after she learned of his reputation, Trivia would instead track him down to learn from him as a criminal, coming to him with a new identity, calling herself Neopolitan. Over the next few months, Neo would train under both teachers, however, ultimately becoming more loyal to Roman, who treated her as a friend and equal partner rather than an underling. One night, she'd attempt to get information for Roman and would discover that the school was spying on Vale's politics and high society for the Malachites, and that she'd unintentionally given up Roman's location. She would then take the data to Roman, only to find that he had already been taken, and would go out to find He Zhang himself, as he had been feuding with the Malachites. After unsuccessfully trying to deal with her father's associate, she disguised herself as him and take his bullhead to rescue Roman personally. The two would then fly to the only place Neo could think of, her parents' house, where they'd barge in and tell the Vanilles that they were staying over. However, Neo would end up drugged and dragged to her room by her father. She would then be rescued by Roman, who didn't actually drink the drug tea, and together they would find more dirt to get out of the situation. As they searched, the Zhang and Malachite crime families would close in, and Neo would go to distract them, but only finding her father in her room over a very expensive and volatile cache of dust. As her father seemed to have finally snapped, she'd lock him in and would grab Roman to run. As they exited the mansion to a wall of criminals, Roman would tell Neo to run, but refusing to leave her friend, she'd create an illusion of the both of them in her room, and their pursuers would open fire, igniting the dust and destroying the house, killing everyone inside, including Neo's parents, destroying any connection to her past. allowing her to fully start over completely as Neopolitan. After this, she would stay by Roman's side, even sticking with him as he was forced to work for Cinder Fall, acting as his bodyguard and enforcer, even defending him from Team RWBY during the Mountain Glen bombing mission, and battling Yang Xiaolong and would have killed her had the former huntress Raven Bronwyn not stepped in. Even after Roman would be arrested, Neo would agree to work under Cinder, participating in the Vital tournament as her teammate, and after Mercury Black would fake an injury, Neo would infiltrate an Elysian airship, freeing Roman, who would reprogram and unleash Elysian Knights to attack the population. Upon realizing someone had boarded the ship, Neo would investigate, finding none other than Ruby Rose. Neo would alert Roman, holding her off until they'd show up, and together they'd nearly throw her off. But as Neo moved in to finish the girl, she would take too long, giving Ruby time to open her umbrella. And being on top of a floating airship would be carried away into the air. While Neo would survive this, Roman unfortunately would not, and Neo, not knowing exactly what had happened, would blame two people. The obvious being the young huntress Ruby, and the other being Roman's employer, Cinder Fall. Tracking the latter down to the Kingdom of Mistral and attacking her in a bar, their fight would spill out into the street and Cinder would unleash her powers, convincing Neo to hear her out. Cinder would then explain the power of the Maidens and the MacGuffins known as the Relics, which Cinder's master, the immortal witch Salem, was collecting. Neo, either convinced by Cinder or just biding her time, would work with Cinder, stealing an airship for her and sneaking into the Kingdom of Atlas, working undercover in the Schnee Manor, finally finding Ruby and her allies and informing Cinder that they had the Relic of Knowledge. Cinder would then send Neo to reclaim it, with the criminal facing off against and escaping the surviving members of Team Juniper and a farm boy named Oscar. After bringing the relic to Cinder, who had failed her own task, Cinder would bring her to Salem's Flying Whale Fortress, where Neo would be forced to wait for orders. But Cinder, craving power, would attempt to steal it from Penny Polendina, and hoping to learn Ruby's location, Neo would tag along, but they would be forced to flee. Neo would then stay in the whale, however, when a group of hunters broke in and destroyed the whale, she would steal the lamp, using it to blackmail Cinder into finally taking Ruby down. Together, they would use the lamp to discover Ruby's plan of using another relic to transport the population of the kingdom to the desert wasteland Vacuo, and they would ambush Ruby and her allies, with Neo going in for the kill, but Yang would take a blow for her sister, falling off the edge and seemingly being killed. Neo and Ruby would then fight, with Neo eventually getting the upper hand, but Ruby reversing it before Cinder would attack from behind, but the girl would grab onto her leg. Rather than help her ally, Cinder would use the opportunity to get rid of Neo for her betrayal and would knock both Neo and Ruby off, where they'd fall into the abyss. Deciding that she had nothing left to lose, and since she wasn't immediately dead, she would attempt to strangle Ruby in the air, but would be unsuccessful, falling down into an island where her journey will continue. Hello and welcome everyone to my second match of Season 3 of my Versus series, where I'll be putting two of my favorite villainous sidekicks with the Joker's lover Harley Quinn and Roman Torchwick's partner in crime Neopolitan against each other to see who I think would win in a fight. Now, to start off, for Neo, the information will be mainly taken from the main series up until Season 8, where the show is currently, as well as the Roman holiday novel, and as for Harley, I'll be sticking to her post-crisis comic variation from her introduction in 1999, the New 52 relaunch in 2011. Now, with all that out of the way, let's start by comparing these two physically. During the post-crisis era, Harleen was in her early 30s, standing at 5'7" and weighing 140 pounds in the prime of her life and in peak condition. On top of having her physical abilities enhanced, Harley may be one of the strongest non-metahumans in Gotham. Coming from an athletic background even before her fall from grace, it probably isn't a surprise that Harley is incredibly strong, even without it being something she particularly focuses on. After being enhanced by Ivy, she was strong enough to block a punch from Batman, can regularly wield large to comically oversized hammers with ease, can manhandle full-grown men, and once effortlessly threw Joker from the corner of the street all the way up to a building. And finally, can throw shattered bowling pins hard enough to pierce Killer Croc's skin and proceeded to knock him out with a bowling ball. As a former gymnast, Harley is capable of moving herself at high levels, leaping and dodging at high speeds, consistently moving too fast for the average goon to react. She's outpaced the Joker, seemingly moving faster than he could see, has kept pace with Batman as well as Tim Drake Robin and Cassandra Cain Batgirl at the same time, and has even dodged bullets, or at the very least was aim dodging. Harley can also take one hell of a beating. Basically all of the Bat family has taken shots at her at one point, including Batman, who put a man straight through a metal door so hard he kept flying after breaking it. She's fallen high distances with basically zero damage, been shot several times, and even fought Killer Croc until she passed out from her injuries. All of this on top of a healing factor that can close bullet wounds in moments. Currently, Neo is a young woman in her early 20s, standing at 4 feet 10 inches in heels and likely weighing somewhere around 90 to 110 pounds. While you could easily mistake Neopolitan for an early target because of her small stature, in reality she's anything but, being a trained combatant and gymnast, and has shown the ability to throw down some of the strongest fighters in her series. Despite her small size, Neo is surprisingly strong, being able to casually block strikes from Yang Xiaolong and Cinder Fall. Can disarm Ruby Rose despite her having a two-handed weapon. One-shotted a fatigued Yang twice and with a single hand sent Ruby flying. Neo is fast enough to effortlessly evade dozens of strikes from a Volume 2 Yang and countered not getting hit once in their fight. She could block bullets already fired, fought Cinder, though it's likely she wasn't going all out in this fight to avoid drawing too much of attention to herself, and fought evenly with Ruby Rose, who was able to keep up with Mercury, who has dodged lightning. Durability isn't really a strong suit of hers. While she can take some hits, considering her emphasis on evasion and how Penny one-shotted her with a blast, I have to assume that her durability is lower than average, and if you manage to consistently land powerful hits, you could probably take her down pretty quickly. Both Harley and Neo are surprisingly capable in this area, both holding their own even against characters out of their class, but even then, one character has a slight advantage here with their showings, and it may not be who you think it's going to be. Harley will have a couple of advantages right off the bat, as she's taller with more weight to throw around, and is more physically developed, being in her absolute prime, whereas Neo has only recently entered hers, and is, speaking completely respectfully, a dwarf. As in heels, she's still short enough to be given the classification. Strength has a couple of hiccups, but due to scaling, it's pretty simple. Both have sent people flying large distances casually, and while Neo has broken Yang's aura twice, both times Yang was actually fatigued, having fought for around 24 hours each time before their encounter. However, Harley knocking out Killer Croc is more impressive than you'd think, as he's easily ripped through metal and survived a large fall seamlessly, seemingly unharmed, and was unfazed by Robin hitting him so hard his metal staff broke over his head, seeming to be more pissed than anything. So Harley straight up knocking him out should say a lot. So I'll give strength to Harley, as I don't feel comfortable scaling Neo to a full strength Yang. Speed is actually much more simple due to scaling. While Harley can dodge bullets, that's where it caps out, while Neo has evenly fought with the lightning timers, putting her clear above Harley here. Durability is also pretty messy, as Neo, while being protected by her aura, doesn't have a great track record with durability, as her fighting style seems to have a large focus on evasion. So the few times she does take a hit, it needs to be looked at, as she was one-shotted by Penny and fled immediately at the sight of Raymond Bronwyn. Meanwhile, Harley, while not too impressive, has at least shown to be able to consistently take several good hits before going down, even taking hits from Croc and Batman. While Neo does have a solid speed advantage, Harley is bigger, further into her prime, stronger, and more durable, all on top of having a healing factor. And so, I grant Harley the edge in physical abilities. When it comes to Harley's armament, it has varied slightly over the years, but for this fight I'll be giving her her classic weapons, those being her signature hammer and a modified gun allowing her to shoot different types of projectiles. Her hammer is her main weapon used against opponents, and has been shown as anything from a comedically big mallet to a straight up sledgehammer. Large hammers typically have a handle length of 3 feet with a... Okay, you know what? You know what a sledgehammer is. You know how hard it can hit when a normal person is wielding it, and Harley has super strength. You do the math. A weapon of hers that doesn't make me sound like I'm being condescending just by describing it is her modified revolver. This firearm was either a model or genuine weapon which he changed to fire single projectiles, similar to a flintlock, however with a more efficient reload method. This weapon could fire both custom bullets and grenade rounds. Harley's rubber bullets may ironically be even more deadly than a standard 9mm bullet, as after ricocheting off 2 armored guards, it still hit hard enough to incapacitate a third. Neopolitan only has one weapon to speak of, her umbrella Hush. Hush could be used as a blunt weapon similar to a bat, or she could use the rapier-like blade built into its handle, which can either be pulled out to use on its own as a blade, or be pushed through the other end to be used for a surprise attack. She would also extend the umbrella to use as a shield, which could take blows from explosive rounds. Fireballs from Cinder Fall, and in the Roman holiday novels, this is confirmed to be a property of the umbrella itself, and Neo does not need to expend her aura to use it for this purpose. Both of these girls have the tools needed to put you down at a moment's notice, but one is better equipped to fight the other. To start off with, Harley's advantage of a ranged weapon, I actually don't feel that it will be all that effective, as Neo's Parasol can tank explosive blasts from dust rounds, and furthermore can dodge bullets and lightning. So I genuinely doubt Harley's gun will be that much of an issue for her. As for which melee weapon will be more effective, it's a bit hard as they're two complete different extremes, as Harley's destructive and heavy hammer and Neo's elegant and swift rapier couldn't be farther apart, so which one will be more effective depends heavily on the opponent. While Harley's hammer is powerful, it's not going to be doing any serious damage for most of the fight, thanks to Neo's aura protecting her from broken bones and damaged organs. Meanwhile, Neo is going to have quite a bit of trouble as well, as Harley is a very nimble opponent even with her speed advantage, and could easily wiggle out of a fatal blow from her, and from there her healing factor will take care of the rest. Thankfully for Neo, she has a counter to the hammer built into her weapon, the reinforced parasol. To keep it brief, you already know why hammers are great for beating down nails, a lot of force on a small surface. However, with the press of a button, Neo can increase the surface level of her weapon, spreading that force out and dampening its impact. So for the most part, what really settles this is Neo's defensive options, keeping her safe and allowing her to dampen the blows from Harley's main weapon. And so, I give Neo the edge in weapons and equipment. Okay, so just like in a few past matches, Neo was uncontested in the area of special abilities, and will by default have the advantage here. However, I would still like to go over her abilities just so you can have a decent understanding of them, just in case you haven't seen her character showcase. As I brought up in the physical department, Neo has her aura, the physical manifestation of her soul, which will completely protect her from physical harm until it runs out. Aura can also be used for offense to boost her damage output. Her semblance was called overactive imagination and has a large variety of uses. Her favorite is the power to create illusions, changing the physical appearance of an object or herself, and even other people. This has many practical uses, her main use being disguising herself to trick enemies and sneak into restricted areas. She could also use this in the middle of combat to throw off her opponent, creating multiple versions of herself which would attack from different angles, forcing her enemy to guess where her actual attack would be. She also liked to create the illusion of teleporting, showing herself in one position and then striking from another. However, she wasn't limited to creating pure illusions, as her semblance can also be used for single-use attacks, where whatever she formed will attack, dealing out just as much damage as it would normally happen as a result of her shattering. She can also create multiple illusions at once, as shown when she disguised both herself and Roman and simultaneously created the illusion that they were in her room. Like in all of my matchups, I will be using Star Wars lightsaber fighting forms to better and more easily describe how each of the opponents approach combat with their particular styles. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. Before her joining the Clown Prince of Crime, Harley had little to no combat experience, but was trained as a gymnast, which would allow her to more easily move her body even into positions most people would find painful with ease. With no training, that means that the showings from her fights in the comics were most likely self-taught, having spent her early years relying on her enhanced abilities while experimenting to find out what works. Harley has even fought with Batman several times, holding her own and even getting the better of him once. Though, in this instance, Batman was more interested in getting a confession out of Harley, so I wouldn't say she's actually as skilled as him, and considering her lack of any real training, you could even make the argument that he let her win. But the showing does show a decent amount of skill, landing several good hits throughout the fight. She's also tangled with the likes of Robin, Cassandra Cain Batgirl, and Catwoman. In a fight, Harley's greatest asset is her versatility, being ready and willing at a moment's notice to use any object from her environment in a fight, often utilizing improvised weapons in the environment to get a leg up on the people she's fighting, either improvising cover or creating and utilizing chaos, even going as far as to put herself in danger if it means she would have an edge. While a high-risk, high-reward fighting style would be considered too risky to be reliable, Harley has proven the ability to make it work for her, stonewalling and even defeating some of Gotham's most skilled fighter, and having proven herself in basically every continuity to be more dangerous and crafty than the Joker himself. When it comes to her hammer, from what showings we do have, it's hard to say which lightsaber form she'd use outside of the Form 1, which focused on wide, sweeping motions meant to fight groups of opponents. This form would also complement the hammer, as wider arcs would grant it more force upon impact. Neo was trained by both a boarding school controlled by the crime lord Little Miss Malachite and the criminal Roman Torchwick, being taught to be an elegant and respectful fencer as well as an underhanded trickster, combining the teachings of both to form her own personal fighting style and surpassing both of her teachers. Neopolitan, despite her small stature, was an excellent fighter who could fight evenly with some of the best fighters in the series. And in fact, Neo was specifically trained with this in mind, letting her use this to her advantage. Neo also managed to avoid falling into the same traps as character Yang Xiaolong and Wei Shini, being specifically trained not to rely on her powers, as her teachers knew that should her aura run out, she'd be handicapped if her skill set relied on them. In combat, Neo's initial method was to wait for her opponents to strike first, then evade and or parry until finding an opening where she would strike with deadly precision and power, repeating this, taking advantage of her small size, often climbing onto her opponents and jumping off for better leverage, all the while tiring out her opponent by getting them to overexert themselves before taking them out in their tired state. However, she's also shown the ability to take a more proactive approach to combat, as shown when she was able to separate RWBY from her team in the Volume 8 finale. She was taught to have 3 plans of attack at any point in a fight, always being ready to attack, defend, or evade when necessary, making her a very flexible fighter able to change her approach at any point in a fight. She also regularly adds kicks into her assault in what is likely a mixture of Taekwondo and Capoeira, using Taekwondo for its precise, high-powered kicks and Capoeira for its fluid motions and acrobatics, which would complement her gymnastic abilities. Both being kick-based martial arts, but Taekwondo being more for power and precision, not being as fluid as Capoeira, which is literally a mixture of dancing and fighting, making it a heavily acrobatic style, less focused on strikes and more so on sweeps and takedowns. If I had to apply a lightsaber to her style, it would mainly be Form 2 Makashi, with elements of Form 4 Ataru. 2 was primarily designed for blade-on-blade combat, teaching the practitioner to use precise strikes and parries to slip through an opponent's guard rather than trying to break through it, making the form very effective for this violent short stack. She'd also take elements of Ataru, primarily by mixing in her kicks with her umbrella blows, but also displaying the ability to go on an aggressive rushdown if you happen to have really pissed her off. While these two actually share elements of their fighting style, with them both implementing gymnastics and improvisation mid-fight, other than that, they couldn't be more different, with Harley being a consistently moving chaotic wrecking ball, while Neo is more like a calm and patient scalpel. Starting with the areas they're similar in, Harley is actually better at both, having spent years as a gymnast and weaving that skill into her fighting style, which would put her use above Neo's, which mainly seems to be for clearing or creating distance. While Neo is also capable of using the environment to her advantage, she simply isn't as good as this as Harley, who has gotten one over on the Joker, Croc, all holding back Batman, as well as Robin and Batgirl. Neo letting Harley make the first move will allow her to control the pace of a fight, as I don't believe Neo could or even would want to bring as much aggression as Harley, because it really is a double-edged sword, as Neo has been shown to perfectly take advantage of overly aggressive opponents, and trained fighters alike with this method. So while I personally see the act of letting your opponent act first a foolish approach, I can't deny that thanks to this combination of Neo's size, powers, and training, she can better take advantage of openings. So just like Harley's improv, for this very specific fighter against this very specific opponent, I will say that Neo's more reactive fighting style does work for her and would be effective against Harley. Hand-to-hand combat tactics is a little messy, as while Harley has fought members of the Bat family, her record against them isn't great. However, we can't ignore the fact that she has gotten the upper hand. The only issue is I don't know what, if any, martial arts she uses, as it honestly seems to me to be all in the moment, with Harley simply doing whatever needs done to win, while Neo's actions are all deliberate and planned, as well as weaved into her weapon blows, which Harley hasn't dealt with. And considering her best showing of skill was against a fighter who wasn't actually trying to beat her, and Neo actually having a plan of action, makes me lean towards Neo here, even if just slightly. For their weapons-based combat, it's no contest. Neo is a deadly and precise fencer who has outdueled people trained for years to battle monsters hell-bent on destruction, and Harley swing big hammer to knock out dummies. However, what really tips this into Neo's corner for me is the use of her powers, which she can use in tandem with her blade skills, creating openings and making feints that she wouldn't normally be possible otherwise, as well as simply attacking from more than one direction. At the end of the day, while Harley's batshit nature and fighting style make her a deadly opponent, there really is no substitute for trained skill and a solid understanding of her abilities, as well as how to use them to deadly results. And so, I give Neo the edge in combat skills and tactics. Let's set up this fight. Let's say that it takes place in a bar where Harley and Neo meet and things don't go so well. Neo sat slumped over in her bar, glaring into the glass. It was a pretty crappy day. No progress in finding Red or Cinder, she didn't have a place to sleep for the night, and she'd have to pour her own drink after knocking out the bartender for assuming her ID was a fake. Granted, they were right, but if they had at least bothered to look at it before saying so, Neo wouldn't have broken her nose. At this point, she didn't even want the drink. She just wanted a bed she could pass out on. Then the door blew open dramatically as Harley burst in, fully costumed and a bloody hammer slung over her shoulder. Alright everyone, I'm in a hurry. Bird Boy's on my tail, so y'all know the drill. Give me her money, no one plays hero, and I don't have to give anyone skull in. She'd make a quick pass by a couple of the easily frightened patrons, taking their money, but noticed that most of them didn't seem too intimidated by her, apparently somehow not recognizing her. In fact, a few seemed to be paying more attention to some girl at a bar. Deciding that since she seemed popular, Harley would shake her down, she strolled up right behind her. Alright, Missy, come on, clock's a ticking. After a few seconds of being ignored, Harley tried again a little less nicely. Hey, did you hear me, midget? Pay up or I'm gonna crack open your skull. Neo, in response, only raised up her hand, flipping her off. Now, having completely lost her patience, Harley swings down her hammer where Neo is sitting, only for the girl to shatter and reappear at her side, drawing a blade from her umbrella. Harley jumps to the side, only getting a scratch from the rapier, but is still angered nonetheless. Oh, okay, I see how it is, you little bitch. Fine, let's play. And with that, the rest of the patrons run out of the bar screaming as Harley rushes in, swinging her hammer yet again. However, Neo is ready, dodging and deflecting Harley's blows until seeing an opening, and she would parry before thrusting her umbrella into Harley's shoulder, extending the blade just before it makes contact. Harley jumps back, holding onto her shoulder while her healing factor gets to work. Seeing that this would be a little more tricky than just bashing the ice cream midget's skull in, Harley decides to get creative. Neo stands, her blade dripping with blood and pointed at Harley. Thinking about it, she really didn't have to fight. She could just use her semblance to book it while the psycho tried to kill her. But thinking about it, Neo didn't want to run. She wanted this. The crappy day she'd had might just be saved if she got to wipe the smile off this clown's face for good. So, lowering her parasol, she beckoned Harley closer and got ready. Harley would open up with a similar attack that she'd started with, but as Neo moved to block, Harley would spin on her heel, bringing her foot into Neo's cheek, splitting it open. Capitalizing on her dazed opponent, Harley kicks Neo's foot out from under her before delivering an uppercut that throws her into the ceiling. Somehow managing to land on her feet, Neo spits some blood onto the floor and gets ready to charge as Harley holds her hammer like a baseball bat. Now ready to move, Neo runs, but before she is close enough, two other Neos leap out from behind her, one circling around and the other jumping up. Harley, thinking it must be a trick, strikes the first one running directly at her, but it shatters, leaving her open as the one in the air brings its foot down on her skull, shattering as she swears from the pain. Finally, the real Neo swings her parasol into Harley's head, which bounces off the countertop, and before the fuzz is gone from her vision, she sees Neo swing down at her and instinctually holds up her hammer in defense. She's forced to hold Neo back and try and get out of this as the short woman stomps her heel down on Harley's foot. Harley then leans back on the counter, rolling over and catching Neo with her foot, sending her flying face first into the bottles of liquor. Seeing an opportunity, Harley flips to a safe distance and pulls out her modified gun, and aiming at the still recovering Neo before firing at the mute. Neo turns just in time to see the grenade as it collides with her, exploding on impact. Harley moves in, loading another grenade just to be safe, but to her surprise, as the smoke clears, she sees a hole in the wall leading into the destroyed back room rather than the bloodied remains of Neo. Realizing she's been tricked, she turns just in time to be cut down the arm by Neo. Working through the pain, Harley blocks a second strike from Neo, but is then kicked in the knee, cracking it before finally a bottle shatters against her face. With glass shards now embedded into her cheek and temple, Harley is forced back as Neo cuts at her with a broken bottle. But seeing a chance, she moves just in time and grabs Neo's wrist before striking the bottle away and headbutting her before throwing her up to the second floor balcony where Neo lands on a rail. Harley then jumps up with a dramatic flip, joining Neo with a smirk. Ooh, nice balance. Are you a pro too? Ah, crap, now we got something in common. I almost don't want to kill you. Harley then gave a small touch to the glass in her cheek, wincing slightly before growling out, almost. Neo rolls her eyes and moves in, taking her rapier out so it could be lighter, and jabs at Harley, who dodges. While Neo is able to keep the pressure up, she can't help but notice that the clown is more composed than her now, moving quicker than her on the rail. In the middle of her thought, Harley backflips, kicking the sword from her hand and embedding it into the ceiling. Neo tries to raise her defenses, but Harley already swings at her, catching her by the ribs and throwing her onto the ground through a table. Neo clutches her side and rolls up to see Harley walking closer, trying to raise up her hammer to crack open the midget's skull when something catches her attention from the corner of her eye, and she turns just in time to be struck in the temple by some ginger in a stupid suit. The illusion shatters with the punch, and before Harley can recover, Neo is back up, kneeing her in the eye before wrapping her legs around Harley's neck, and with the twist of her body throws her to the ground. Neo quickly climbs up onto Harley and drives a broken table leg into her side. Harley punches up in response, but only seems to piss Neo off more, who goes in for another stab. Harley, desperate for a change of position, gets what she's sure the Joker would consider a brilliant idea, and aims her pistol up into the air right at the ceiling before firing a grenade, bringing down the whole roof on them. Harley's whole body is sore as she throws a support beam off of her and looks around, seeing the brat's arm under some rubble with blood pooling out from under it. Dropping to her knees with a sigh, Harley takes a moment to breathe before her nerves explode in pain as she's stabbed through the shoulder down into her body. Looking over, and she sees Neopolitan with her sword. Shocked, she turns back to see the illusion disappear as her vision starts going dark. Seeing Harley's head drop, Neo pulls the blade out and Harley's body slumps over. Limping out of the somehow still standing doorway, Neo comes face to face with a boy in bright colors getting off of a bike, who approaches her asking where Harley is. Neo, growing tired, just points to the rubble, and as the boy passes her, she can't help but notice the keys were still in the bike. After looking into the bar and witnessing the carnage, Damien turns to arrest the woman, only to see that she, his sword, and Dick's old bike had all disappeared. Robin pinches the bridge of his nose and sighed. Grayson was gonna kill him. And with that, I declare Neopolitan, the mute crime lord, the winner. Alright, this fight actually turned out better than I expected. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Harley only got one category. How'd this turn out better? Well, yeah, I expected her to lose all of them. Physical was the biggest surprise to research, as before this, I had no clue Harley was a superhuman in the original comics. And not only that, but actually stands a chance in a purely physical sense. Now, while Neo could also be considered superhuman by DC standards, there's two issues. First off, she's not as strong as Harley, not having as good feats, only ever breaking a fatigued Yang's aura, not Yang at full strength. The first time, Yang had fought for around 24 hours, and the second time, Yang was one of the 4 characters allowed to actually do something that season, so it's no surprise she'd be tired from carrying it. And even worse, her evasive fighting style and getting one-shotted by Penny implies that she's something of a glass cannon, firmly putting this in Harley's favor. Weapons was actually pretty simple, as Harley's gun would be ineffective and her hammer, while not bad, didn't hold weight against Neo's umbrella blade, which could take powerful explosives even without the backing of her aura. Combat skills was very important this time around, and it was actually pretty close, as Harley does have some impressive showings, and is even better in some areas than Neo, such as adaptability and gymnastics. But there were 3 things that gave this to Neo for me. The first being the honestly huge difference in skill with her weapons, as while Harley can use her hammer effectively, Neo is one of, if not the best fencer in her series. Even going as far as to push Cinder, who, even though I personally despise the cunt, have to admit that she's probably the best fighter in the series, and Neo managed to force her into using her powers. Second is tactics, as with Harley, I rarely see her actually implementing them, usually just doing whatever it takes in the moment. Neo, on the other hand, was specifically taught that with every action she needs to have 3 follow-ups in mind. Something that, considering her style and how she's always been ready for whatever's thrown at her, I believe she took to heart. And finally, and most importantly, Neo's implementation of her powers, which, while she doesn't lead too hard into being taught not to use them as a crutch, she's still very good with them, and in an instant can change up her position, summon a free hit, hide herself, or if she has enough information, can even look at someone close to her opponent to throw them off. At the end of the day, Neo simply has too much in her favor for Harley's physical superiority to play as big of a role as it could. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you agree that the mute dwarf would defeat the Joker's woman, or do you think that Harley is crafty and skilled enough to come out the winner? As always, let me know what you think in the comments below, and if I got anything wrong, please feel free to correct me. Right, please rate, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, as I have plenty more like it. I also have a Twitter and Discord where you can talk to me directly, as well as links to the channels Winter Ghost and 3 Tactics Gamer, all in the description. Right, with all that, I'm Ray932, and I'll see you next time.
Here, I'll show you who I really am. Come, Loki!
Again, it's that persona.
What's going on?
Don't make me laugh. Justice, righteous, keep that shit to yourselves. You and your teammates piss me off.
He can use 2 separate powers? Then everything, even his appearance, was a fake.
You're going down. I'll destroy you. Go down with me.
No way!
That bastard! He made himself go psychotic! Now, let's see you drop dead one at a time in front of your precious friends!
Damn it, he's lost it. Here comes!
Die!
Hey, you must know already that what you yearn for isn't to become an adult or become a boy.
You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I kept ignoring you, pretending you didn't exist. But you are me. And I am you. You've always been inside me. What I should yearn for, no. What I must strive for isn't to become a man. It's to accept myself for who I really am. In any event, you're a devious bunch. I can't believe you kept something like this hidden for so long.